14 states in 14 days. We're doing it by motorcycle. It's called Biking the Battleground. Huntingtin, West Virginia. A historic city, a busy city, a city that relies heavily on commerce and industry, located on the Ohio River. And listen to this, a quick remark from the mayor.
I have a capital C after my name in capitalist, is that I understand how markets work.
That would normally be unremarkable, except this mayor, Stephen T. Williams, is a Democrat.
I have a capital C after my name in capitalist, is that I understand how markets work.
He made the remark in context of discussing with me, along with his press person Brian, how the small community of Huntingtin has overcome the coronavirus impacts, as well as overcome its stigma as being the epicenter of opioid addictions in the nation. Shutdown that took over the rest of the nation. I understand that it didn't impact Huntingtin as drastically as some other communities. Why is that?
Well, frankly, I think that we found ourselves prepared to deal with this because of issues that we had to deal with in the past. 6 years ago, we were considered the epicenter of the opioid epidemic. And it was amazing how our community came together, everybody identifying their role to play. And we were really shooting from the hip. We had no infrastructure in place, and that we had nobody through which we could copy. We were about the only city in the nation that was hitting this head on at the time. And we ended up seeing eventually, as our efforts evolved, there were partnerships among institutions, there were partnerships among neighborhoods, there were partnerships among faith groups. In essence, what we found is that in the midst of a crisis, how do we roll up our sleeves together and address it? Businesses were actively involved in this. Well, interestingly, this certainly wasn't by design, but we learned an awful lot from that. When the pandemic came, we didn't miss a beat. We just simply let everything that was already in place continue to adjust, but move to address the pandemic. And I honestly believe that everything from the Chamber of Commerce, the way that we were interacting with them, as to how we could be working with local businesses, certainly with the hospitals as to how they would structure themselves in the neighborhoods, how the school systems were actively involved in all of this. It's as though we had actually structured ourselves to be the epicenter of whatever is coming, that we are organized to be able to address it, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and that's fascinating that you were able to learn such lessons from the devastations of the opioid crisis to put them into place for this pandemic. And how is the opioid issue in Huntingtin nowadays?
The overdoses are down substantially from where they were at the peak. The one problem that we found that we're having here is that it was said by now, I can't recall who the individual was that said this. This was a couple of decades ago. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And the problem that you have as a result of the pandemic, there are individuals that depend upon the connection with others. And when you start to depend upon telemedicine, not having face-to-face, we started seeing some spikes but most of the spikes that we were seeing were not as much in our community as it was in the more rural areas of West Virginia. And we were seeing that we weren't necessarily being hit as hard as they were. But our overdose levels are still much lower than they were at the highest point that we had. And again, it was simply the structures that we put in place. We started linking behavioral health with public as part of our public health strategy. 60 Minutes ran a story where we had behavioral health professionals that were embedded in the police department, and then when we would go on a raid, then we would have the behavioral health professional go there and then offer to provide help to those individuals, help get them who were fighting addiction, and rather than arresting them, finding ways to be able to get them towards treatment. Interestingly, all of these things come together, and I'm not switching gears, but we've had the entire nation is having to deal with a pandemic, economic uncertainty, and also social unrest, just one wave right after another. But we eliminated the business tax beginning April 1st. And we were doing it a quarter at a time, because my concern was, will we find ourselves where we are strapped for cash, and then I have to start making decisions with our employees. What I'm most proud of, at least in our city operation, is that we're the only government entity that never closed a day, never closed an hour, never closed a minute. Wow. Every office stayed open. But we were able to keep our doors open. In the spring, we drastically adjusted our capital expenses. We had paving, we had sidewalks, we had a lot of construction that we just put on hold, because I didn't want to have to furlough anybody. And what we found is that our sales tax wasn't hit as hard as we expected that it was going to be hit.
That's a lot of decisive actions you've taken, and it's remarkable too, because my readership at the Washington Times is largely conservative, as you probably know, but you're a Democrat taking these decisive actions, rolling back taxes. That's a little bit surprising to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm a Virginia Democrat. Let's be quite clear about this. But we made hard decisions about 3 or 4 years ago that gave us the reserves, that gave us the ability to be able to make some of these decisions. I mean, honestly, I would love to be able to just out and out eliminate that business tax for retail and restaurants. That would make me competitive with any retail and restaurant that decides that it's going to operate outside the city. We'll continue to have additional fees, but I learned, my background is in finance and in investment banking and the brokerage business. So I might have D after my name, but I have a capital C after my name, and capitalist, is that I understand how markets work. And the one thing that we know that we have to do is that we have to be able to show that if somebody is questioning the cost on something, they're truly not questioning the cost, they're questioning the value that they're receiving. So I'll put us up next to anybody on anything with the services that we provide. But if I'm able to reduce and eliminate, reduce in large measure, if not eliminate the business taxes, then we're going to be paid back 100-fold with the employment, because every one of those taxes will be hiring somebody, and then those people will be spending money in the community, and we will receive the tax revenue as a result of that.
Eliminating taxes, cutting spending, prioritizing spending so as to benefit the tax-paying citizens first? What a concept. Normally conservative concepts. But this is a Democrat, and this is what makes this story optimistic. It shows that outside the beltway, outside the partisanship of party politics, not all Democrats are socialists. They can even be capitalists. What a great way to end 14 states in 14 days. Common ground and cooperation. It's called Biking the Battleground, and I can't wait to meet you on the road.